Joining me now, J.D. Gordon, former Defense Department spokesman. J.D., it's time for a J.D. to J.D. call, so it's good to have you here. And young Mr. Gordon, what do you make of this new report that our top military leaders are getting frustrated with the White House?
Well, it's not surprising at all, JD, and thanks for having me on the show today. Sorry about the video feed. It looks like we're just on audio today. But, this is not surprising at all. I was in the Pentagon for 4 years as a Pentagon spokesman. My last 9 months were the first 9 months of the Obama administration. I got to tell you, JD, during the Bush administration, I was invited over to the White House to sit in on meetings and give my thoughts on policy and how to articulate that policy. But guess what? Once the Obama administration took over, I was not invited one time. They didn't want me over there. I think that the Obama folks are a lot of ideologues in there, and they really don't want to hear from the military. I think these folks think they know it all, so why would they listen to the military if they already have all the answers? So I think it's not surprising that you're seeing this type of reaction from the military, being frustrated about the micromanagement of this war.
Well, let me ask you this, J.D. Based on historical and institutional fact, most of us have the notion that those in the military are apolitical. Regardless of who the commander-in-chief is, they salute, say, yes, sir, we'll try to institute the order. Against that backdrop, is the frustration that is growing now, is that typical despite whatever party is ensconced at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue?
Well, usually, JD, most military folks tend to be conservative, tend to vote Republican, somewhere around 80%. So usually when there's a Republican administration, they're going to click a little bit better. And when the Democrats come in, they usually cut the military very significantly. If you look back at 1970s, Jimmy Carter, he hollowed out the military. We had a hard time defending this country in the 70s. It resulted in the disaster to try to free our hostages in Iran. Jimmy Carter was one. Bill Clinton was another one. He took a hammer to the military. Barack Obama is taking a hammer to the military more like a sledgehammer. $1 trillion in defense cuts over this next decade, and he's worked with congressional allies to do it. So I think that a lot of military folks just don't trust the Democrats that when they come into power in the White House, and it's mutual. The Democrats really usually don't support the military like the Republicans do, and so both sides have an animosity to start.
J.D., you have a new article out questioning the role of military officers serving in high-profile administration posts for President Obama. You question whether they're good officers or, quote, useful idiots, end quote. Mighty strong language there. What did you conclude?
Well, I actually wrote that column because of something that our friend and colleague Senator McCain said. Senator McCain actually insulted my friend and colleague for 15 years, John Kirby. He said, this idiot, Admiral Kirby. Now, John Kirby is the Pentagon chief spokesman. He's a two-star admiral. And when I got to think about it more, JD, I thought, well, that's pretty harsh, and I feel pain for Admiral Kirby, but Senator McCain raises a really good point, and that is Admiral Kirby is basically often misleading the American people, I've got to say. He's trying to justify things like releasing those 5 Taliban top leaders from Guantanamo for an army deserter. We're talking about a deputy defense minister, deputy intel minister, 2 governors, for a guy who walked off post. So John Kirby's tried to justify a lot of things to the American people, including these $1 trillion in defense cuts. I think it's unjustifiable. So I wrote a column for Fox News Opinion about Obama's useful idiots, talking about Admiral Kirby, talking about General Dempsey, and I got to say I side more with Senator McCain on this one.
Well, there was an interesting bit of public policy where Senator McCain and then Senator Obama seemed to be on the same page, and that was the notion of shutting down the detention center at Guantanamo Bay. Now, you've just written a new piece about that for Newsmax.com, talking about the president's long-term strategy, still trying to close Gitmo. You say part of his motivation to close the facility is to get the suspects brought into the United States. Why would that be his goal?
He wants to free as many of them as possible, JD. This is President Obama's little secret on Guantanamo. He knows that if he closes Guantanamo and brings those 149 detainees to the United States, judges could let them out. No one has to escape from Supermax if a judge lets them out. This is Obama's secret. He's a former law professor. He knows that there's not enough evidence to keep these guys behind bars. So if he brings them into the United States, activist judges who are long on ideology and short on concern for national security will just let these guys out. That's part of Obama's plan. He's tried to release as many Al-Qaeda and Taliban terrorists as possible. Nearly 30% of those have already gone back to terrorism. They've killed U.S. troops. They've been responsible for the Benghazi attack. One of the ex-Gitmo detainees, Sufyan bin Kumu, was one of the leaders of Ansar al-Sharia that staged the attack on our Benghazi mission. So President Obama knows exactly what he's doing, and his secret is to bring them to the United States where judges can let them out.
Others, such as Senator McCain, wanted to see Gitmo closed, and when the argument was going on in Washington, JD, I was asked by various people what my thought was, and I said, well, if the notion is to bring them, quote, to United States soil, why don't we reopen one of the closed bases up in the Aleutians and take these enemy combatants from the tropical comfort of Cuba to the harsh climate of the Aleutian Islands? As a public policy notion, does that sound like a reasonable idea if both the Republicans and the Democrats agree to shut down Gitmo?
Well, I definitely like the warm climate for the cold climate switch, but the issue is, JD, it's a legal status issue. Since they're down at Guantanamo, they're not on U.S. the mainland soil, so they're out of reach of the judges to release them onto Main Street. Because if the judges have released it, judges have ordered their release at Guantanamo, but there's no place for them to go. They can't just walk outside the gate in Cuba, and they can't get repatriated to their countries or a third country. So if they're actually in the mainland United States, even if it's somewhere like Alaska, judges could actually let them out right then and there. And so that's the issue. It's a legal issue. Obama's a former law professor. He knows that very well. Two good examples, JD. When I was down there, I was at the Pentagon, we had two enemy combatants who were kept at the Charleston brig, Jose Padilla and Ali Al-Mari. And the Bush administration tried to keep these two in the Charleston military brig as enemy combatants. But you know what? The courts were always ruling against the Bush administration. They didn't have the authority to do it eventually. So even if Obama moved them into the United States and wanted to keep them locked up, he couldn't. We have a constitution. We have three branches of government: judicial, legislative, executive. The judicial branch gets the vote. And guess what? A lot of these activist judges would release these guys in a heartbeat, since we didn't have battlefield detectives running after them to collect.
We will have to leave it there. J.D. Gordon, we thank you for your time and very provocative insights. America's Forum will continue following this Newsmax Now update.